wired? Yes, here we are. Good. We have a great morning planned for you. I'm so glad to see so many of you here today. There's so many questions about where we're headed, what's happening, so glad to see what we're doing. This is magnificent. We have a fantastic panel set up for you today, and I've been interviewing people formally and informally for about 3.5 months now. Watching feeds, watching articles, watching trends to help prepare for today's event. So some of the people in the industry that you may know that I spoke with would be Rob from Spectre and Stan from Devco and Steve from Talbot. I had some great interviews here. And then I went on the other side of the border and I spoke with Sharon and David from Polyconcept. I spoke with Joanne Lance from Geiger. I spoke with David Woods from Adventures in Advertising. So I really got a bird's eye view of what's happening today, what's happening in our industry, and what we're going to be looking forward to. So today, as I go through the slides, it'll represent some categories of what we're going to talk about. And in each of the slides, there will be some quotations from different interviews that I've had to kind of get our conversation started. Then I'm going to pose some very specific questions to our panelists and allow them to answer. And after they have some time for closing remarks and give their views on trends, then we're going to open it up to you to see if you have any questions for the panel as well. So let me introduce my panel to you today. Paul Bellantone, CAE, who is the President and CEO of PPAI. Paul, please join us. Catherine Graham, who is President of Right Sleeve and CEO of Common SKU. Catherine. Sharon Willishell, who's President of Polyconcept North American Apparel. And Kathy Chung, founder and President of Redwood Classics. And if all else fails that my panel is stumped at the questions, I have a crystal ball. Sure. All right. Morning. How are you?
Great.
Okay. Perception. Perceived as whatever it is they want to buy that day, not as an industry. Members would like to think of themselves as part of the team. Customers refer to providers as vendors, suppliers, or at best, experts. Now, this is some information that was taken from a survey that PPAI is in the midst of. So I'm going to call on Paul Bellantone to give his first comment here. Paul, the first quote is yours. The second is from research that you're doing to help members align better to serve today's providers, right? Yeah. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the findings of perception of our industry. And after you talk about perception a little bit, I've got another slide there that talks about alignment. So I'll let you just kind of carry right through to that.
Sure.
Okay.
So I wish the first quote wasn't mine, but it is. And I think that it speaks directly to alignment that very frequently our customers think of us as the last product that they bought. And we don't want to be that way. We want to be on the front end of the marketing plan. We want to be in the development of what it is that they're trying to accomplish, not leftover money at the end of a budget that says, hey, let's go out and get something for the trade show. So I think as an industry association, PPAI, PPPC, it's our job to really bring awareness of us as an industry and not just these 800,000 products that could be that can carry somebody's logo. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay, let's have a look at alignment. This is a really interesting slide, and along with perception of our industry. Now, what they did was they started to survey end buyers, and they surveyed members and said, okay, members, what do you think your customers want? And then they went to the customers and said, what do you really want? And here's the slide.
Yeah, this was telling for us. We're about to launch a 5-year advocacy program for our industry down in the States, and what we did before we started the program was we hired a company to do some benchmarking for us. How will we know if the work that we're doing is actually moving the needle? So what we did was a benchmarking perception study. And what this is, it's a study that shows alignment. What are the client priorities And what do you believe that you bring to the table as a promotional consultant or a promotional products distributor? And you can see that we are not in alignment with our customers. So the client priorities is offers, competitive prices, and rates. That is not the business you want to be in, but that's how they see you in this marketplace. Now, I'm not talking about every company. The companies that are up here, generally not the case. The people who are in this room, generally not the case. But we have 22,000 distributors in the U.S., and a lot of times they're playing in that top 2 or 3 things: offers competitive pricings, offers options and choices, offers custom solutions. Well, the internet can do all of those things. That you don't have to be different or special to do that. On the provider side, where we want to see is we want to be seen as problem solvers. We want to be seen as proactive, and we want to be seen as someone who takes the time to listen and understand needs. I think our opportunities are to be in the middle, is to find that middle ground of, okay, we know that they want good pricing, but when was the last time, think about this, when was the last time you paid the lowest price available for anything? Anything. 2 things on a shelf, let me get the low price one. We don't. There's some value beyond that, and I think that that's where we need to focus our time. Price is what you need to do to get in the game, to get the appointment. We all need to be competitive. But from there, that's where you get the opportunity to bring value.
Perfect. Okay, our strengths. Here's some of what our interviewees said. We said that it's an eclectic industry, which we would agree with, right? The size and tradition that's been around for a while, so that is definitely a strength. We're in this to play game. Not an industry that's shrinking. A lot of experience to tap into. We help businesses grow, help them connect with their clients, and achieve their goals. So, Catherine, there's so many strengths that surface through my interviews. At the end of the day, we are the media that remains to be seen. So what do you see as our industry strength going forward?
I think we've got a really big opportunity right now. I think there's never been a better time for us to be taking market share from other mediums. And you look at where things are going, just increasingly being digital in terms of all the interaction that we're having with brands, that we're having, between us as individuals, and there is a need to have a physical, tangible experience with the brand. And especially for those companies that are, technology companies where their only interaction is digital with their customer, that having that, tangible thing in the hands of their customer to create that emotional connection, I think is huge. So pairing that with, social media and being able to leverage, what's happening overall in the digital space, I think there's never been a better time to be in this industry.
Agreed? Yes. Okay, relationships. This was a really, really interesting conversation I had, springboarding from the whole digital thing. One of my interviews said, who is buying from us? They're asking that question. We've broken down the distributor company into personal relationships. No longer do we do PKs in general. We structure one-on-one time to understand their individual needs and what products resonate with their clients. Now, that was one perspective. It was interesting to get some of the other perspectives, again, with, with the way digital has impacted us. In a recent survey, 57% of the people have already made a decision from whom to buy before speaking to a supplier. In our online survey, I asked our respondents what percentage of time in a sale was the human element, and the top answer was 21 to 35%. In other words, you're engaging with your clients, 21 to 35% is the percentage of their sale decision. Then I asked what percentage they thought it would be 2 years from now, and the majority of people said exactly the same. I was expecting to see a little bit of a trend to say people are going to be working more online, but the people that we interviewed said we expect our involvement to be about the same as it is right now. While the leaders I interviewed cited technology as a critical tool, they also commented that they're heavily invested in relationships. My take on that at the end of the day is we buy emotionally. So Kathy, when we spoke, I heard you say that you felt strongly that relationships are one of the pillars of your success. What's your belief on why?
Absolutely. Relationships has definitely been a pillar of one of our successes. A big part of it is the way that we approach how we do business. When it's a relationship with a distributor, we view every company that we work with, from a supply chain, from our supplier to even our customers or distributors, really as business partners. And when you go into a business together, there's a mutual respect. and therefore we're building on the trust. And together we can work very collaboratively in building business together, because ultimately that's my understanding of this model here, right? That's what we're here to do.
Absolutely. And Sharon, you're heavily invested in systems to support not only the relationships with the distributors, but the tools that they're going to build to relationships with their buyers. So how important is that human element?
Well, I think for us, the human element is critical, and the relationship is really about working with them in the best way that makes sense for them, for our customers, as well as for any given situation that they're in. So, we do have a lot of tools. We also invest tools in our people who are on the phone. So while there are online tools, for some people that works. That's how they want to interact, depending on what they're comfortable with. And that's our job, is to interact with them in the way that they're most comfortable and the way that we can best support them. That may change, I think, for them. Certainly there are people who in the world today, and we keep hearing about, where things are going and how different generations want to buy differently and have a different type of relationship that might be more digital. So we want to support that, certainly, but I think that can also be a given buyer in a given situation. If I have a customer I've worked with for a long time and it's a pretty simple sale, I may be comfortable doing a lot of it with online tools. If it's a new client and a big opportunity, I may feel like I want to be able to pick up that phone and talk it through with someone. And I think the products today too take part in that. When you look at if it's a product that I'm comfortable with and that I feel like I know what I'm talking about, I might be more comfortable using an online tool. But if I'm not as comfortable, that's when I might want to pick up the phone and do the kind of person-to-person phone collaboration. So I really look at the investment in tools as another element of just looking at what works for individuals in their relationship with us and being able to provide what works for them at any given point in time and what their sale process looks like.
Perfect. Okay. So let's take a look at the other side of the coin and their weaknesses. Look at the workforce statistics. 50% of the workforce in a couple of years will be Gen Y, millennials, or younger. Is this industry prepared to sell, service, and communicate with the generation in which it needs to be? We have to move much faster than we have in the past to ensure we are building tools and going to market in a way that's supportive. So when I spoke with my interviewees, they did cite the fact that depending on that, we had a little conversation about does size matter. Depending on the company, are you equipped? Are you prepared? Do you have the resources to be able to take yourself technologically, as Sharon was saying, into the future? So what rang through loud and clear from my interviews as well was complacency, was a level of unwillingness to embrace change. Now, I think we'll all agree that the only person who likes change is a wet baby, but we know that it's inevitable. So, Catherine, your team is young in comparison to the average industry professional. Is this a proactive move on your part?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a proactive move in terms of mitigating against change. I think a lot of it goes down to the philosophy of the business model that we've chosen to pursue in the agency style approach. So we bring in people at the junior level, at an account coordinator kind of capacity, and train them up within the organization to give them a career path, to be able to get them when they're malleable in terms of embracing our culture and the approach to how we do things, and be able to kind of grow the farms, you say it from there, in terms of these little portfolios that they can then build and grow, as opposed to bringing in experienced salespeople who, inevitably, if you're going for industry perspective, it means you're poaching from other distributors, which we don't believe in. And inevitably, when you're bringing someone into an organization, you don't know if they're going to fit from a culture perspective. So the more you can kind of enable that from the beginning and shape that as it grows, I think that's a approach. And also, you have to recognize that the buyer is changing too. So if you're bringing in a team that's able to relate to the buyer in a way that resonates with them and form those relationships and engage with them in the ways that they want to, then it becomes a win-win.
Perfect. Okay. And Paul, from your perspective, what do you believe we need to pay attention to that, if not addressed, is going to hurt us going forward?
Well, the recognition that we're doing this in real time. I'm an optimist about our industry. We've been around for hundreds of years. We continue to grow against other media, and the way I look at this is, we've managed to be what we've needed to be to serve the clients that we have. And I don't look at that as a weakness, that 50% of the workforce is changing. I see this as an opportunity. It's a viral group. They like to talk to each other. We're an exciting industry. And my challenge, I think the biggest fear I have is that we continue to treat ourselves as a commodity and train our customers to treat us as a commodity. But I look at this and say, well, why aren't we celebrating with this group that we're the way that you can retain employees and hire these new employees, and that in a digital world they need to have that tangible product that carries the brand. So I see this as opportunity, not necessarily a weakness.
Okay, all right. Our distribution channel. Our distribution network has always been diversified. Primary and secondary products are falling all over one another. Both the products and the ideas have become commoditized. If we do not collaborate and share across the supply chain, a more innovative player without a care in relationships is going to figure out what the end user is looking for and bypass everyone. Now, these were some of the concerns that came up when we were talking about the distribution channel. Interesting, there was a lot of positive take on it too. I'd probably start a riot if I posted some of the comments that arose from my conversations I've had in the past few months. There are definitely some feelings of lack of respect and lack of understanding that exist. However, a couple of my interviewees said, Jay, we've been having this conversation for 35 years. Now, they haven't been having it with me. We still have this channel, so there must be something about it that's serving us. So, Kathy, you're relatively new to our industry. You choose to buy into this model. How do you see it working?
So yes, we are relatively new. We are going to be in our 5th year in 2005 in the promotional industry. We've embraced the model, but quite honestly, I can't, other than understanding the food chain and the distribution and not overstepping, selling to end users, I quite honestly cannot say I know what the model is. It's really evolved. I've spoken to, similar to Jay, a number of different people, from industry veterans that have been in the industry for 20, 30 years to, newcomers such as myself. And there's a bit of confusion out there, but I think the main thing we all understand is to respect each other's, I guess it's respecting the food chain and respecting each other's strengths and weaknesses. I think one of the things that I'm seeing in the industry from, I almost call myself a little bit of an outside perspective, is that we're so commoditized, and really we're taking out the human element of the way that we're selling, which is really unfortunate, because at the end of the day, when I'm speaking to veterans, isn't this why we even got into this industry? I mean, this association was founded based on relationship, but what we've now done is really just focused on just the commodity. We're selling on what the lowest price is, because you know what, I hate to say it, but that's the lowest, it's the lowest hanging fruit. And so I believe between the model, from what I understand, my perspective is, if a distributor and the supplier relationship, if they respect each other's boundaries and each party lives up to what the expectations are, there's so much opportunities out there, and it's all about collaboration.
And Sharon, strengthening that current model, is that part of what you're doing going forward then?
Absolutely. I find the comment there that ideas have become commoditized interesting, because I don't really believe that ideas can ever become commoditized. And I think that is the value that what we have to look at, I think, as an industry is, where are we providing value? And I know we've had those conversations, throughout the years. I think what has changed and what we keep an eye on is that there's a lot more transparency in our industry and in this supply chain over the last few years, because of a lot of the advances in digital and ability to go and search online. So, and I'm probably making myself sound ancient, but I've been in the industry about 17 years, and back when I started, it was a paper catalog. People didn't have, us as suppliers, let alone people in China, didn't have websites where you could go and search and find product and pricing and all of those things. So, now that's out there, and buyers are able to go and see those things. And I think the idea that, probably savvy end buyers don't understand what 2PQ2R or 5P means, they do. So I think that that's where we as an industry and between us, and I agree that, suppliers and distributors, we need to work together and leverage the strength. So I always think of the strength. As suppliers, we have ideas, don't get me wrong. But I think that when it comes to, really working with those end buyers and providing solutions, that's where, our distributors have the value of contributing the ideas that are not commoditized and really helping that end buyer to come up with a solution to a problem, not just a product. And then our job is to do what we need to do to support that. But I think that given the transparency, we do need to work more collaboratively together. And I think that as an industry, we're moving that way. So, having some of these discussions about how can we take out the elements of our interactions as suppliers and distributors that are not value added, so that we can take some cost out of our that overall model. And be able to then, again, we can leverage as suppliers what we provide, and what the unique thing is that we can provide, and our distributors can do the same. So I think the model works. I do think we have to be willing to be open to, though, what is going on in the world around us, and how do we need to work differently so that we can leverage each of our strengths.
And I think, and I started the comment with about, respect and understanding. And that particular quote that Sharon's referring to did come from a supplier. And the conversation went like this. We were talking about, we understand that our industry has been commoditized. One of my coaches always says, you're always teaching people how to treat you. So we have to be very careful how we position ourselves in the marketplace. But that quote came out because one of the suppliers said, I helped to come up with the ideas because I'm a creative manufacturer. And then they shop my ideas. Now, as distributors, we have the same thing happen, right? So I think that's where the concept of ideas being commoditized, we think that's our value add. That's, as Sharon said, that's something we can bring to the table to be solutions providers and to enhance that for our customers. But if they are looking at our ideas not as intellectual property, but as just part of the process, and we allow them to take it, we have to be very careful of that. So that's where that comment came from.
I can just add one thing to that, Jay, that when you look at the what you were speaking to in terms of the buying process earlier, is that if the customer has already found what they want online and they know exactly what they want to order, what value are you adding in the process? And I think transparency in price and margin is only an issue if you can't justify your value.
Yes, of course, which brings us beautifully into the topic of globalization. We did have a great roundtable yesterday on this. There were some fantastic things came out. One of my interviewees said there are now more ways for people to buy promotional products, including directly from Asia. That threat has always been out there, but has become a much more viable option. $3 headphone adapter from Amazon delivered directly from China, and for that price, someone has found a way to make a profit. So, Paul, the online providers came up in nearly every discussion that I had with everyone. Do they have an edge?
They have an edge if somebody wants to shop online. I think we look at marketing and the different technologies out there that something is going to replace something else. When social media came around, it was like, well, we're not going to have to do any print marketing anymore. We'll just do everything online. I don't think one way of going to market necessarily replaces all the others. I think it's more additive than that. So I do think you need to have an online presence. I do think that there are some sales that are going to make sense for it to be online. Why wouldn't they? If there is no way for you to bring value to that equation, then that's one where you don't have the right to that sale. But I think it's an additive thing. I think there's going to be occasions where you do bring something to the table.
Okay.
Online's not going away. I want to go back to something somebody said about respecting the food chain. I don't believe that. I think you have to earn your right in the food chain. If we all just sit around and decide that you need to be loyal to your business, and you need to be loyal to your customers, and you need to be loyal to your families, and you do that by finding ways to add value to your customers. But I don't think that any of us, we will not be an industry if we sit here and demand that everybody work within the channel. Because we can't operate as if there's not an internet. We have to remember, for up until the internet, we treated this industry like a secret. We had secret codes and secret catalogs and secret pricings, and Well, we can't operate that way anymore. So the internet's part of it. We need to adapt.
Okay, I have another quick question for you. And you mentioned in another address that you're receiving an increasing number of phone calls for members who are wishing to do business around the country, around the world.
Right.
So is this a growing trend?
Well, I don't know that the customers that are calling me, the members, the distributor members that are calling me do not want to do business globally. They're being forced to do business globally. So it could be a small distributor in any state saying, I have a customer who now has a trade show in London, and they need to have product there, help me. That distributor does not want to set up a London office. They don't want to have to know about customs. What they're counting on their association for is to help me find a partner in that country. So Ed Ahad, the president of PPPC, myself, 3 or 4 other CEOs of organizations, we're partnering on this together and serving as a resource. So when that member does call me up, I can go to my counterpart in London and say, hey, Gordon, I have a distributor that has a customer that has a show. Where do you see a match in your membership that somebody might be able to help them?
Okay.
But our members are being dragged into this. They're not embracing it.
Okay. Are you experiencing that as well? Okay, Catherine, the amount of information available to our buyers has absolutely skyrocketed the past few years. In fact, a survey shows that buying a car, people will research as many as 24 touch points before they actually go to purchase the vehicle. So how are you harnessing your power to do that?
I think you really need to decide where it is that you want to insert yourself in the buying process. And we were very early adopters of e-commerce. We built e-commerce in-house back in the year 2000. And when we thought, the dream back then was, you build, an e-commerce website and it becomes just an ATM. You can sit back and the money will roll in. And that's just not the reality of what happens. 2 years ago, when we revamped rightsleeve.com, not only did we take e-commerce off the site, we took product off the site completely. No catalog. All it is now is case studies and start a project button if you want to engage with us. It was terrifying to do that. Thought, what are our customers going to think if all of a sudden they can't go and shop online? And the reason why we did that is that we decided where we wanted to insert ourselves in the buying process was before they started to do all that research online. We are the experts. It is our job to know your brand inside and out and your marketing objectives of what it is that you want to achieve and recommend the product that is going to be the best fit for that objective. So we don't want you wasting your time going around and shopping and trying to find alternatives for yourself. That is our job. So if you can if you are able to insert yourself in that stage of the buying process, it totally changes the discussion. Price gets off the table completely, and it becomes about relationship and loyalty. So it was the best decision we ever made as a company. We send people to 4imprint all the time now. When customers come to us for small commodity-based orders where we know they're never going to grow into a business the size that we want to deal with, and they're not the right fit for us, we go, here's a great solution. Here's the exact product that you're looking for on 4imprint. Go for it. They want to self-service. Let them. So decide, how it is that you're going to where it is you're going to get involved in the buying process and what tools you need to do that. Our customers absolutely still want to engage and transact digitally. So we send them online presentations for them to engage with. We send them online order approvals and make it very easy in terms of the digital process. But they don't want to do the whole things themselves from start to end digitally. So choose the tools that you're going to employ to be able to service the kind of customers that you want to deal with.
Perfect.
Jay, there's an interesting add-on to that. There are 24 touch points in buying a car, but the decision is generally made in the kitchen. So when you think about the research that's being done, that's your value add. It's when the products are being selected and we're looking for something physical, where do you want that product to ultimately end up? We want it to be where the decision is going to be. A fact like that is one that's going to differentiate you from anybody else that might be having that conversation with that company. Mm-hmm. So it's knowing the client and knowing the power of what we can do.
Right, and meeting them where they are. Right. Okay. Storytelling. So you have a good story to tell. What do you bring to the table? We've been talking about creative ideas. We will talk more about product safety, the need to justify time and dollars. So in the survey I cited earlier, it said 57% of people make a decision from who to buy for before speaking to a supplier. Further, 53% said sales experience kept them loyal to the brand. In fact, at the Art of Sales on Monday, the common thread between all the speakers was clearly about this. It's 5 times cheaper to keep a customer than it is to get one. So in the survey that we did before this, most people polled said they rarely, if ever, did a direct mail program. And most people, if they rewarded their customers at all, did only the top few percent. So I also asked you what you say when people at a cocktail party asked, what do you do? And most of the answers were, again, around product. Most of the answers, one person said, we provide promotional solutions that drive traffic and promote the bottom line. Another said they help customers carry their brand using promotional products. One said, I sell pens. When I was at PPAI convention, one of the presenters says he helps their clients get customers. So the number one way our members say that they communicate with their customers is with salespeople, as well as through email or e-blasts. Now, show of hands, how many of you think it's important to communicate with your customers through our media? Absolutely. Kathy, you're a Canadian manufacturer with very clear of who you are and what you provide. You have a story to tell. How critical is it to have your story nailed down?
I think it's really critical to have I don't necessarily know if it's having the story nailed down than simply to be truthful and transparent, because that's what we've done. We've come to market. We've been very focused, we've been insightful, yet we've been very purposeful. Our business, our brand, we have a purpose in why we want to be here, and it's to sustain as much Canadian manufacturing, North American manufacturing as possible. Our story is authentic, we're a family business, and I'm just very transparent in how we present our brand. And also at the end of the day, that also goes back to our product. We tie that with our product because we are so product driven. So we're a small supplier. We have limited budgets. However, we try to be as creative as possible in getting our messaging out there. Going to Catherine's point with the digital, I mean, for us, that's why it's been a tremendous opportunity. It's allowed us the opportunity to tell our story directly to the end user. And we often are an end-user driven brand. We do get end-user inquiries. And what we do is build on those relationships that we have with the distributor and filter through the orders through the distributor. So it goes back to the previous point when we were talking about the relationship. That's where the human element is still so very important. We've built those relationships with the distributor. We've told our story, and now we have the end users pushing and wanting to buy our product. And then we have to put it through within the distribution channel.
So when I'm talking about story, I mean like your USP, like your unique selling proposition. Who are you? If somebody asks who you are, if everyone says I'm in the promotional products industry, it's great from an industry standpoint to say we're part of a network, but what is it that we've been talking about value? What is it that we provide that maybe is a little bit different? So Catherine commented about her changing her business model to say very clearly on her website, we are now a solutions provider. So changing her story to be a little more succinct and narrowing to a certain marketplace. So Paul, do you see your members veering from their strength and maybe watering down their stories just to see their factories maintaining their dollars? And I'll qualify that. Some of the comments that were coming from some of the factories were saying, we want to believe in the distribution network. We want to be able to support our distributors. We want to be able to come up with products and solutions for them. However, between competition, offshore, we're having to veer from who we are, who we have been, to take on new products, new markets, new something in order to keep our people working. So are you finding that at all?
Well, I think there are two different questions in that. The first one about story is you have, in the U.S., we have 20-something thousand distributors that are in this full-time that all work with the same couple of thousand suppliers, all have the opportunity to sell the same exact products at pretty much the same price. So if you don't have a story, then you're lost. You're lost in that shuffle, and you will have that low-hanging fruit, which is price. And that's what you'll be focusing on. From the supplier side of things, I think that they're having the same challenges. As more suppliers are becoming horizontally oriented, when I came in the industry 15 years ago, there was a bag supplier, and there was an electronic supplier, and there was an apparel supplier, and now there are suppliers that have all different ranges of products. That's changing the dynamic on the supplier side of things as well. But I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I see that as that change we were talking about, that somebody sat down with their staff and their team and their family and said, for us to exist in this marketplace, we have to be more than just a pen or more than just a bag. So again, I look at that as our industry's ability to change and to differentiate in the marketplace.
Okay. Let's talk about domestic production. The third annual survey of a senior manufacturing executives at companies with sales of $1 billion or more found that the number of respondents who said that their companies are already bringing production back from China to the United States had risen 20%, roughly 13 to 16% in the past year. The number who said they would consider returning production in the near future climbed 24%. So this is the Boston Consulting Group. They picked this article up off the internet through a logistics company that I work with, and they were citing this trend of people wanting to bring domestic manufacturing back, or maybe a little more focus on it. So we're witnessing salaries going up in Asia and a rise in inflation there. Couple that with our dollar at 80 cents to the U.S. greenback. Those are only a couple of issues that have an effect on importing. However, in our survey, when I asked the question, and this was really interesting, what is most important to your client when preparing an order? Where it's made was at the bottom of the list. Quality and price came in as the top two. Sharon, as an importer, you have to deal with product safety, dock strikes, currency issues, and so much more. This must be an incredible balancing act. You're solid in decorating locally. Do you see an opportunity to do any domestic manufacturing going forward?
Absolutely. I think that where we manufacture, we're always looking at where the best place is given the product. So we just actually purchased a U.S. Manufacturer. And that was for a plastics company. And for that type of product and that type of manufacturing process, it is best suited being domestic. We are always looking, though, again, whether that is domestic or whether that's in China or whether that's somewhere else in the world, for where's the best place to produce a given type of product. I think that a lot of the items that can come back into domestic production are items that require that the labor component is less, because although there is increasingly the inflation or the wage increases in China, it's still significantly less. So to the extent that a product does not require as much labor as it does, a type of process like plastic injection molding, you can have it here if it doesn't require the high labor. Generally, what we find, if it does have a high labor component, it's still less, even when you take in, they always talk about, the logistics cost and supply chain costs. Even taking all of that into account, we're still finding that there are other places in the world, China as well as other places, that it makes sense to do the production.
Okay. And Kathy, one of my interviewees, a large Canadian distributor, said he had a Shop Canadian tab on his site, and the tab was the least tab accessed. In fact, she eventually deleted it, and I was absolutely shocked. Given today's market conditions, required delivery times, and product safety issues, do you think the door is more open for Canadian manufacturers?
Absolutely. It's absolutely more open for Canadian manufacturers. To give you guys a sense, the factory that owns and operates Redwood Classics actually specializes in private label production of apparel for many designer and major retail brands, Coach being one of them, Asics. All of these guys, these are new accounts that we're opening up, and they're coming to us because they are looking for just-in-time delivery. They are looking for domestic partners that can do the shorter runs, that can do lower minimums, and to be able to deliver in a timely fashion. That's been our core competency, is on delivery, short delivery, small, low minimums, as well as having the flexibility. Typically, in a domestic apparel market space, we have to be flexible. I always believe what happened in 2008, basically Darwinism was at its best, and the manufacturers that are left now, and at least in my industry, in the apparel industry, I believe they have a reason to be here, so they all have core competencies. And so in my space, I definitely believe there is a demand for it. I mean, I look at this industry, being 5 years old or going into our 5th year, we've been growing, and thank you to everyone here and the support. So, that may be that one distributor, but I would say look at our business and look at our brand, and we're not everything to everyone, and we understand that. It goes back to the way that we've approached our business, or I've approached our business, which is to be focused, to be insightful, and to have a purpose.
Right. And as Paul alluded to earlier, that in terms of a lot of people positioning promotional products later in the process, which we don't love, but it's where we are right now. I think having somebody hands-on locally to be able to produce things relatively quickly is a great edge that we have too. Let's talk a little more about online. I just extracted this segment from an article that PPAI had produced a few weeks ago, talking about millennials, the next generation. With to-do lists, calendars, GPS cameras, Skype, and apps for absolutely everything, millennials are using technology to make their lives so much more efficient. And somebody else that I actually sat beside at a session had said to me, we've developed a separate URL on our e-commerce site for each of our 175 reps. So they're looking at technology from a supportive standpoint. So I have a couple of questions for you guys on that. The first quote is from Promotional Consultant today, as I mentioned. The article was actually entitled Etiquette Lessons from the Millennials. So we can talk more about this when we hit the trends section, but what my interviewee said that they are witnessing is a split between the traditional promotional product provider and the new provider in terms of the communication style and the use of technology. So Catherine, today's buyer is different than, say, 5 years ago. How are you merging technology in your business to support your clients? I know you've talked a little bit about that. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more?
It goes back to tailoring the experience to how the buyer wants to engage.
Right.
We have some clients who engage exclusively with us on Google Chat. Like, who would have thought, 5 years ago that would be the way that someone actually would communicate the fact they wanted to proceed with an order, and being able to have that, instant discussion going on with their salesperson. I think the expectation is really around responsiveness, and if being able to leverage technology to do that. And if you think that you can wait a day or two to respond to something that a client sends you, like they're used to like instant gratification. I mean, this generation coming through where they've grown up with social media, where if you don't hit that like button, they don't see any likes within the first instant of posting something, like they think it's an epic fail. So just that ability to respond quickly and have technology be the method to do that. I think that really the emphasis around that is being able to have the right tools in place to allow that to happen. And mobile is a huge
We talked about that in the globalization session last night as well. And one of the things that came up at our table is how we are being forced to. Technology is pushing us to do everything so much faster at such a greater extent. It's not necessarily our nature to do that either. We'd like to. Our brains are wired to focus on only one thing at a time. So when you're multitasking, you're not actually doing a lot of things at one time. What your brain is doing is shifting constantly. So we are not focusing as much anymore. So we're training ourselves to be able to do a lot of things at one time, but it's making a shift. But it is that's, I think, our new group is saying we have all of this information, all of these ways to communicate, and they're very good. The new generation is very good at communicating that way. So we need to provide those platforms. As you said, who would have thought Google Chat would have been the way that they would have wanted to communicate with you? This morning I woke up and I saw the Twitter feed on our session. It was like, yeah. That was early.
It's interesting that with millennials, one of the things that we're finding that we actually have to train them on is how to single task.
Yes.
Because of the fact that they are so used to going back and forth and thinking they can do all these different things at the same time.
Yes.
And in reality you can't. So it's
That's right.
focus on the one thing at a time.
Yes.
20 minutes or whatever the
Yes.
time period is. Shut off your email. Put your phone away. Stop
Yes.
texting. Stop
Yeah.
checking Facebook.
So difficult, isn't it? So difficult, yeah. Paul, so many people I spoke with brought up the topic of online direct providers. Some saw it as a business model that served a certain demographic. Others saw it as a threat to our current providers. I think you alluded to this a little bit earlier, and I think Catherine, you did too. Do you have anything else you want to add in that category?
It's a threat if you don't change and adapt to it. We're not going to wish it away. There will be online service providers. Find something else that's more valuable than that.
Okay.
Let it take your non-profitable business.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Let it take your non-profitable business.
Yeah.
You can't make money on a $400 order.
Yes, we've
focused.
learned that. Haven't we, Gabriella? Okay, let's talk about education a little bit. Press is making companies weary on what they're giving out and possible effects on the consumer. This technological stuff is serious. $18 billion industry is not a lot compared to other industries in terms of the ability to promote education. Now, you know our association works so hard to provide platforms for people to be able to come out and improve their skills, improve their knowledge, collaborate with one another. We've got so much going on. When I was at the PPAI convention, the chair stood up after a breakfast session that Paul was doing, and he talked about cultural experiences. And he gave an example. He says, if you're going on a hike, he says you would naturally check the gear to make sure that it was suitable for the conditions that you were going to be in. He said, if you're a new mom, you're naturally going to check your change table and your crib and your stroller and everything to make sure that it's safe for your new child. And if you're going to buy a car, then you would naturally go through and check out the safety features to make sure that that car matched up with, with the expectations that you had from a safety standpoint. And so we take for granted that if it's on the shelf, it's safe to use. When I spoke with David Woods, he said to me, 10 years ago, product discussions never even entered into our conversations. And he goes, now we hardly have a meeting where it's not brought up at least once. So, Sharon, there have been some serious product recalls lately. I remember reading one about in a university where chargers went on fire. How much emphasis does this subject require in terms of education?
I think it requires a tremendous amount of education, not only for our customers, our distributors, but also for end users. Mm-hmm. And understanding what some of those, what some of the requirements are. Sometimes what we're finding is that our distributors are coming to us, asking us to provide the information that their end users. A lot of the larger end users, that becomes a critical part of the buying decision. Mm-hmm. And so there has to be an emphasis and a focus on it, because otherwise you cannot service that type of an end user. So it's something that we think is critical in terms of educating ourselves as well as the industry. So we're very involved with QCA, which is an industry group that works on standards for our industry, and being transparent, again, in terms of what those look like, providing that information to our customers so that they can then provide it to theirs.
Mm-hmm. And then when I interviewed people, they were saying as long as people look at us like little promotional tools, that we're not equating the fact that these are useful marketplace, not only communication tools, but they have application. So we need to be cognizant that the application is safe and for use, obviously.
And
I also
sorry.
I also think that when you talk about how do people start to devalue you within that chain, right?
Right.
One of the things, if you want to go online and buy direct from an Asian source that you have absolutely no idea what their factory looks like, whether it's compliant from a human resources standpoint, you don't know how well they test their product, you don't know any of that. Mm-hmm. For us as a supplier, that is value that we can provide.
Right.
Where we go in, we have our team of our own people overseas who audit our factories and who do quality checks and all of those things. So that's where you can provide a real value. Mm-hmm. That somebody can't just get from $3 headsets that they don't even know who they're purchasing them mm-hmm. from. And I think that most end users and most distributors now are very aware of the types, when you hear things like these recalls, the types of things that can happen. Mm-hmm. And again, that's where I think we can actually, it becomes part of the value that we provide and that we need to provide mm-hmm. To be able to ensure the type of quality that really end users and our customers
And
expect.
as Paul alluded to that alignment slide, where on the top side, what the customer's expectations are, which are price and turnaround, and then what we want to deliver in terms of value add, and so we know that we're not quite in alignment. So this is a way that we can bring ourselves into alignment, right? Did you want to make a comment, Paul? I'm going to call it Catherine.
We have, growing a brand is our responsibility, but protecting brands are our responsibility either. And I don't know that a company would risk a couple of pennies if they thought that the product was ultimately going to damage their brand. We need to be careful, though, because I don't want us trading on that fear, because what's going to happen is the company's going to say, you know what, until this industry figures it out, we're not putting our logo on anything. And that would be, to me, a worst-case scenario. The responsibility falls on us, though, because, you know, we want a distributor to ask that customer who's ultimately going to get this product. And if it's a child and it's a hooded sweatshirt, well, it can't have the drawstrings on it. So that's the right question to ask, but we shouldn't have to ask our customers, do you want the exploding charger or the non-exploding charger? That's our job behind the scenes to make sure that we get that
question,
right.
That's a great question.
Really dramatic.
I love it, sure.
So we just have to be a little bit careful about how we position our industry as it relates to product safety.
Okay, so product safety is, I'm gonna keep going if you don't mind. You guys will have a chance to have some comments at the end. Education in general, I think we talked about product safety as being, that's what came up as being one of the top things that we need to talk about. But what came up through my interviews is also professionalism in general in our industry. So Catherine, do you want to talk about that? Like, you know, in terms of increasing our level of professionalism, what else do we need to be educating ourselves on?
I mean, first of all, there are a lot of resources out there that everyone should be taking advantage of. PPAI is amazing at putting the education sessions on at the shows and offering webinars throughout the year. There's organizations like Promo Kitchen that are sharing information via, you know, blog posts and podcasts. Take advantage of what is out there in terms of continuing to, you know, develop yourselves. But for those who are managers, you got to think about how you're continuing to develop your people. And as small businesses, that's sometimes really hard. You don't have, you know, big training budgets to be able to send people, you know, to courses. So think about how it is that you can leverage knowledge within your own organizations. We launched something 2 years ago called Right Sleeve University, where we put on a session once a month, and we had people within the organization teach the session. So our graphic designer, you know, taught a course on graphic design. I taught a course on finance, and it was interesting to see kind of how it is that things that you take for granted because of the fact that you know them aren't things that everybody knows. So teaching people about, you know, net margin and overhead, and our salespeople know, you know, gross margin inside and out, but they don't necessarily understand the concept of overhead, and showing them the difference that 1% increase in gross margin can make on the bottom line. That was an absolutely eye-opening experience for our young team who knew nothing kind of about the business side of finance, and it had a big impact of improving our margin overall last year. So thinking about ways in which you can offer education to your team that is, you know, beyond the basics like that, you've got to invest in them if they're going to continue to grow.
Mm-hmm. That's a great thing. I think with what PPPC has to offer as well is that, you know, there's so many education platforms, as you were saying, online, and Chantel is a fantastic resource for anyone. What we find is sending information out to the principals that it doesn't often get dispersed through the team. So, you know, I would encourage all of you to make sure that, you know, when something comes up, send it to everybody, encourage them, and you know, help to grow your team from an education perspective. Let's look at opportunities. We did talk about a few because we recognize that that any challenge is going to be an opportunity if we look at it that way. Low barrier of entry means more people can learn about our industry, and people who have talent and desire can enter. Now, this is a great spin on what so many people say, oh my God, there's so many people in our industry, but this person that I interviewed said, hey, that's great, because it means somebody, as they said, with talent and desire can enter in. When you take a more collaborative approach, opportunities are endless. Purchasing has gotten much better in utilizing software and understanding that consolidation pays. So again, good for us. One of the people I interviewed talked about eliminating waste and said, you know, companies are looking for that edge. They, as you mentioned, Catherine, about watching that bottom line. How do we protect that bottom line? How can we get to our product more efficiently? If they're using a provider, a team of providers that can answer those questions really efficiently and give them the information, like, yeah, we've got that $3 headphone, but do you want to buy the one that goes on fire, or do you want to buy the one that's going to work? So, you know, bringing that information to market is going to save them a lot of time and money going forward. Our industry is incredible because we're a people media. I wrote a book on it. My interviewee said that there were opportunities in relationships and decorating in bringing new talent in our industry. Kathy, what do you see as one of our greatest opportunities going forward?
I think one of our greatest opportunities going forward as an industry is to create an ecosystem where it's a collaborative effort. In order for this model to exist, we need to evolve. I believe everyone else is evolving. I'm, again, a relatively new player in the industry, and I feel like perhaps part of our success has been because of the perspective. We came in respecting the parameters that are within the model, however, always looking at things with new perspective, and we have genuinely looked for distributors to work collaboratively with, and I mean, even to the point where we're constantly hosting factory tours. We have end users come with us, with the distributor, to close sales, and we've done numerous sales where we can do that. We're showing them the behind the scenes, so it's all about supply chain transparency. People understand, they can gauge. I mean, I always say PPPC, we're professionals, and part of what we're supposed to do is to extend the shelf life of a brand. And how do we do that and have brand engagement? How do we do that? We take them into our world and we make them part of our process, and from a distributor standpoint, and also the distributor involving the buyer. The person at the gate who's going to allow it to go to the higher level to sign off the check, they have to be engaged. So that's where I see there's a lot of opportunities to be transparent with that.
You hear that word transparent a lot, and you're cool if we bring our customers to your factory?
Totally.
Absolutely.
I've even gone to presentations with some distributors where I'm going to the end user's office, down at Bay Street, right? Because they want to see a face. I think part of it is, too, going back to the story, is to be authentic. Who are we buying from at the end of the day? What does this brand represent? And I believe that's where our brand is a little bit, we've got a bit of an edge where we're authentic. We're real people. We're real people. We're Canadians producing for Canadians, right? At the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And Sharon, what are you focusing on?
In terms of right now?
What are you focusing on? What's most important to you in terms of opportunities? What are you focusing on going forward?
Well, I think one of the things that we're really focused on, you mentioned the globalization.
Yeah.
And so for us, that takes there's a couple different levels to that. So we do have customers who come to us saying, I am now supporting this end user who they have a global brand. And they want a solution provider, they want a distributor who can deal with their brand globally. And, I think that in the past there was a lot of, even within large brands, there was kind of fragmentation where individual regions of the world, for them, they allowed them a lot of latitude in terms of how they handled things. And now, and it's interesting to me because everybody that I've heard talking up at this panel has spoken about brand and not about logo. Mm-hmm. So I think about that old thing you'd find in the airline book that would say your logo here. And it comes to the value in how we perceive ourselves and how we interact with our customers and end users, that it really is about your brand. So one of the things that we have heard from distributors is that it's very important to a brand that their brand be represented consistently across the globe. And what they were finding was that it wasn't. Mm-hmm. If they were in another region, all of a sudden the brand was not represented the way that they wanted. So that type of being able to support global brands, I think, is going to become more important for our industry. And so it's something that we are looking to provide, because it is true, as Paul said, that it's tough to be able to provide that solution. And, we have operations in Europe as well as here, and it's still tough for us to provide that sort of integrated solution, and that's what we work towards. So there's that level of kind of that globalization. Also, what we talked about earlier, which is just our kind of backside of it in terms of manufacturing. Mm-hmm. And, how do we look globally at where we are producing goods. And then for us also, it is about looking for, we have been almost solely focused, really solely focused on distributors in North America and in Europe. But there's a big world out there. And in a lot of ways, that's where a lot of the opportunity comes in, because that's where there's growth, that's where there's people. So how can we look to support distributors in other areas of the world? So those are kind of the three if there's one thing that we're focusing, you said one thing, so three.
One thing.
There's a lot of things, but if there was one key
The main
thing,
thing, the main thing.
I think it's that concept of the globalization.
Globalization, okay, all right. Okay, and you talked about branding as well. So we're going to, my last slide here, I'm pretty sure it's my last slide, is on trends. And what I'd like to do, I'll read this, well, let's read it together. Motivation for everyone is to do the right thing. Companies want to do business with people who are not messing up the environment or employ 13-year-olds, etc. The millennial generation wants to be part of something good. They seek out opportunities to work with companies who are making a difference in the world in some way. This is so huge. The more research I do, the more I feel, the better sense that I get of people sort of returning to their authentic self. And I think this has a lot to do with the whole transparency. The internet has forced us to be transparent, which is awesome. You no longer own your brand. Your customers own your brand. And if you think you're in a position to tell them what your brand is, you're wrong. Because they can we already showed in multiple ways that they can do a lot of research to find out who you are. They massage your brand and they tell you back who you are through social media. And what they're saying, especially the millennial generation, in some of the interviews, some of the surveys that I read, they said, would you rather have a job that paid you really good money, but maybe the work wasn't exactly inspiring, or would you rather have meaningful work and maybe live a little more frugally? Overwhelmingly, it was the latter. So our new group is saying, I want to plug in. I want to have something, I want to have a place where I can grow, where I can aspire to be a better person, where I can be more involved in building a community, and I can make a difference. So this is a really important trend to pay attention to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to allow each of our panel members to make a comment about what they see as is a growing trend, and to offer their final comments. And then I've got my clock up here. It's 9 o'clock. So after their comments, we'll have about 10 minutes or so for you to ask some questions, okay? So Kathy, would you like to start with a couple of closing comments?
Sure, I just think we're in the new economy. I mean, we speak about the millennials, but essentially the new economy is the triple bottom line, which is people, planet, and profit, because all of that put together equates to sustainability. If you take that model, we put it towards our own industry, I think it really gives each of us something to think about in how we run our business and what our purpose is, and how we should focus to add value and ensure that we have a sustainable industry that I think there's plenty of opportunities for. In terms of trends, I think buying local is now a lifestyle. A lot of people I'm sure you've gone to a farmer's market in the last few years of your life. Also I think in such dynamic market conditions, if you look at a lot of the corporations, they're being more diligent with where their spend is. So yes, they're price conscious and they want to look for the lowest price, yet at the same time they're also looking for quality. So it's become, if you look at the retail, or if you look at some of the brands right now, you're either really high end, that's doing really well. I mean, Tiffany during the last few years have been getting they've been having record years. And then you also have the fast fashions of the world, which is the H&Ms, and they're also doing remarkably well. It's where you have the middle end, your middle market. So I think that goes back to quality versus quantity. So that's where also what we should also focus on in terms of trend.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Sharon, what's your?
I think the thing that I come back to, and the topics that you touched on here are really obviously the key things that we are keeping in mind. I think I love this industry, and I think we have a tremendous opportunity in front of us. And that is to really take ownership of our role collectively in the end user and their brand. Mm-hmm. And in helping them to understand that, we don't give out a product because people need another mug. We give out a product because, an end user is utilizing our solutions in support of their brand. And I think that the opportunity for us as an industry, it's exciting that we can begin to work together more closely and more collaboratively. And to me, that probably does mean that there's a technology component there, right? Mm-hmm. But that we can work together to provide better solutions, and then also, use some of that to provide efficiency between us, so that we are able to each focus on what we can do well.
Common SKUs and
Catherine?
I think just embrace change.
Mm-hmm.
We as an industry cannot sit still. And if we think that a few years from now we can be operating the way we are now, where there is duplicate entry happening all over the place. There's unbelievable manual processes. The average supplier touches an order 9 times before it goes out the door. We cannot survive as an industry going forward like that. We will be absolutely disrupted by someone coming through that has thought about a better way to do it. So be curious about how it is that we can continue to innovate and embrace that and don't be afraid of it. There are so many opportunities out there for us to think about kind of doing business differently and just be open to that.
Change. Paul?
Well, I think we do a really good job embracing change. I'll give you an example. 15 years ago, there would have been a guy standing up here, and they would have been looking for the woman that they could put on this panel.
The token woman.
The token woman. So I am
The token man.
I am the 50-something-year-old white guy that they needed to pull in to throw onto this panel. So that's change. And we need to recognize that because we're dealing with this in real time, sometimes we don't see that, but we are changing. In terms of opportunity, we rank ourselves against 14 other media, digital and print and business to B2B and B2C and cable TV. We're the fourth fastest growing. And that's just within our channel. That's reported by distributor sales. We're the fourth fastest growing, and we're hundreds of years old. I think that's encouraging for us to be this industry and still being as more successful than the other media that's out there. And we forget something. We forget to celebrate the fact that people like us. Mm-hmm. Of all of those other media, there's not another one where when your customer gives it away, somebody says thank you, and they're asking for more of them. And that doesn't happen when you're going on to a website to watch a video and a commercial pops up. And I mean, except for Super Bowl where people embrace the commercials, there's really no other time when people pay attention to the media, and we forget that. We make this so complicated, but people like us. Mm-hmm. And that's a great place to start.
Mm-hmm. That is a great place to start. I do a lot of presentations to business groups, and I changed my presentation a while ago in that I started out in a very specific way, and I started with a box of chocolates. And I talk about media being communication tools and sensory media because when you hold that promotional product in your hand, there's a whole lot more experience that goes on from you, all of your senses being involved with it than any other media that's out there, right? That's why I call it the human media. So I start the presentation, I go with the box of chocolates, and I say, talk about other media, and I say, watch this is really cool. And then I say, who are the chocolate lovers in the crowd? And I'll go out, and of course people got their hands up, and I'll go up to somebody, and I'll open the box of chocolates, and I'll say, here you go. And the person will take it, and of course chocolate lovers, they just put it in their mouth, and they just start to melt, right? And I'm a hero. And when they can talk, they say, thank you. And I give them the box, I say, you know what, keep the box. And they go, oh, thanks so much. And what I share with the crowd is exactly what Paul just said, is that I just gave them my advertising, and they said thank you. That doesn't happen anywhere else. So we need to be really clear on who we are and what value we bring to the marketplace. What we'll do is, do you have some questions? Does anybody have some questions that they'd like to pose to the panel? We've got about 10 minutes to be able to do that. Yes?
Do you have those chocolates?
It's that time of day, is it? If we don't have the answer, I have my crystal ball. David?
Paul, as far as markets are concerned, we're seeing in Canada with the drop of oil, we're seeing starting to shudder a little bit, and we're putting more emphasis on our American sales. How serious is this Buy American attitude that's going on in the States?
I think it works for some companies on some things. There's 28 million businesses in the United States, and they all go to market in a different way, and they're all expecting different things. And I think that a company can base their philosophy on made in Canada for Canadians, but when you really look at the total spend on your company compared to the entire industry, it's your niche for your customers. You know your customers, and your model might work for you and for your customers, but there's over 1 million companies in Canada, and not all of them care that you hire young and train people all the time. So a short answer to that is it's an issue for some companies, it's not an issue for others. It's not the most looked up search field in our searches or in SAGE's searches.
I would also say, just we deal with that being on the U.S. side, and in most cases, when people really care about Buy American, it would be specific industries or governmental, where they're required to Buy American, or, you know, the unions and some of those kind of. Apart from that, we don't see, there's not a big push from our distributors based on their end users to Buy American.
Was this of value to you? Did you enjoy it? Good. Okay. We can keep this chat going. If anybody wants to pose questions, I'm at jae@jaeassociates.com. Find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, JMRang. And if you want to put any questions out, I'm happy to share them with the panel. We can broadcast them through PPPC. I've had the good fortune of being able to consult my crystal ball, which is from, I have to put my last slide up here, so I give credit to St. John's Trophies, who were kind enough to print it. And it says, the future is in your hands. So I have a crystal ball for each of our panelists. I'd like to thank them individually because they've been so awesome to come here and share their knowledge. Kathy?
Thank you. Thank you. Wow.
And Sharon?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
See, we're opening them up.
Catherine?
And I said thank you.
We said we're opening them up and holding them, and we said
I know.
there you go.
Love them. Show floor is going to open shortly. I can't say how much I appreciate the opportunity to conduct this session for you. It's been a great learning experience for me. Again, if I can help you going forward, please engage me and the panel members, I'm sure. It was really interesting when I went down to meet with Joanne Lance from Geiger, and I went down to the PPAI show, and I was connecting with Joanne. I'd never met Joanne, but I was following her, and I thought she's one of the most decorated people in the industry. She's an amazing, amazing person. And I had booked to go to a luncheon that she was doing on a panel, and I thought, I'll go to the luncheon, I'll hear her speak, and then we had booked to meet afterwards. So my flight was late, and by the time I got to the hotel, ran through the hotel, and it's like 4 miles with my luggage, and I got like the last 10 minutes. So I missed the lunch, which is too bad, and it was $55, which is like 150 Canadian. And and at the end of it, I ran up to catch Joanne. She went backstage to get rid of the mics and everything. Then she came out. She goes, "Let me just check my phone quickly." I said, "Sure, no problem." She goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I've double booked myself." She goes, "I can't speak with you." So I kind of stood there and was like, oh, and my day's off to such a great start. So I looked at the education session. I picked up another education session that was going on, hit the show floor, made it a great day. Joanne and I had booked to get together the following day. When we did get together, she is an absolutely delightful person. I mean, her, she's just amazing. She was just so generous with her information, everything. At the end of it, she said, "Jay, do you have a favorite charity?" Well, she didn't know who she was asking, right? Said, "Well, the scholarship program in Canada, I mean, that's my baby." And she goes, "I'm going to give you $500 to your scholarship program." And I said, "Why?" And she says, "I feel so badly that I put you out." She said that it's my Catholic guilt. She says, I have to do something for you. So she is donating $500 to our scholarship program, which I think is pretty awesome. But I have to tell you, everybody that I interviewed, and I called a number of people and had some informal conversations, including our panel members who made, and I'll tell you, significant effort to get here today. I am never, ever, never surprised at the generosity in our industry. People are so willing to share. They're so willing to give. Everybody I called for an interview, they said, absolutely, when and where. Anybody that I spoke with and said, if I need you as a panel member, can you be available? And they said, absolutely. They didn't even know what time the session was, where it was located, and they were willing to give of their time. But I think that's indicative of our industry. I would love to see us get together more often, whether it's online or offline. Let's carry this conversation forward and help each other build a great future. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great show. Thank you.